Welcome, thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts, to our channel. Tonight, we dive into the realm of the supernatural with shocking poltergeist encounters, real-life haunting stories that will terrify you. These bone-chilling tales are not for the faint of heart. From haunted cabins in the woods to cursed manors and abandoned asylums, these true stories of poltergeist encounters will send shivers down your spine. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. If you love terrifying tales of the paranormal, you're in the right place. Share your own ghostly experiences in the comments below, and let's get ready to explore the darker side of the supernatural world. Now, turn off the lights, grab some popcorn, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. Story 1. The Haunted Cabin in the Woods, a real-life poltergeist encounter. In the heart of the dense forest, a seemingly abandoned cabin stood as a testament to forgotten times. The locals whispered about its haunted history, but when a group of friends, Samantha, Mark, Lisa, and David, decided to spend a weekend there, they were skeptical of the legends. The cabin, with its creaky wooden floors and dusty corners, seemed perfect for a weekend escape. On the first night, the air grew colder, and shadows danced on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere. An unsettling silence blanketed the cabin, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. As the friends sat around the fireplace, sharing ghost stories, they were oblivious to the dark presence slowly creeping in. Around midnight, the temperature dropped drastically. The fire flickered and almost extinguished, sending chills down their spines. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps upstairs. Mark, trying to be brave, decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he ascended the creaky stairs, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. In the upstairs bedroom, Mark found nothing unusual. But as he turned to leave, the door slammed shut on its own. Panic set in as he struggled to open it. The others, hearing his cries for help, rushed upstairs. Together, they managed to force the door open, but the chilling experience left them shaken. The second night was even worse. Objects began to move on their own, chairs scraping across the floor, books flying off shelves, and windows rattling as if in a storm. Lisa, a skeptic, tried to rationalize the events, but even she couldn't deny the mounting evidence of a supernatural presence. As they huddled together in the living room, the whispers began. Faint at first, but growing louder, the voices seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. The friends could make out fragmented sentences, pleas for help, warnings, and anguished cries. Samantha, a sensitive soul, felt a sharp pain in her chest and collapsed, gasping for breath. David, a med student, checked her vitals and found nothing physically wrong, but Samantha insisted she felt a heavy weight pressing down on her. The climax came on the third night. The friends, now sleep-deprived and terrified, decided to leave the cabin at first light. But the entity had other plans. As they packed their belongings, the cabin seemed to come alive with a malevolent force. The walls shook, and a deafening roar filled the air. Dark, shadowy figures appeared, swirling around them. The friends ran for the door, but it slammed shut, trapping them inside. Desperate, they joined hands and prayed for protection. The air grew thick, and the temperature dropped to freezing. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and they bolted out, racing to their car. As they sped away, they looked back to see the cabin's windows illuminated by an otherworldly glow, the shadowy figures watching them leave. Their harrowing experience was captured on camera, and the footage went viral, leaving viewers with a chilling reminder: some places are better left undisturbed. The friends never returned to the forest, and the cabin remains a dark, lonely sentinel, waiting for its next unsuspecting visitors. Story 2. The Poltergeist of Blackwood Manor, a terrifying true story. Blackwood Manor, an old Victorian house nestled in the outskirts of town, had been abandoned for decades. When the Henderson family moved in, they were unaware of the house's dark history. The grand, sprawling estate with its overgrown gardens and ivy-covered walls seemed like a dream home. But from the moment they set foot inside, strange things began to happen. It started with small, unsettling events, doors creaking open on their own, lights flickering, and cold spots in certain rooms. Mrs. Henderson often heard faint music playing in the parlor, as if from a distant, forgotten time. Mr. Henderson, an architect, dismissed these occurrences as the quirks of an old house. Their children, Tommy and Sarah, were less forgiving, often complaining of nightmares and unseen eyes watching them. As days turned into weeks, the disturbances became more violent. Furniture would be thrown across the room with an unseen force, mirrors shattered spontaneously, and the family would wake up to find symbols drawn in dust on the floors and walls. Tommy began to have night terrors, waking up screaming about a shadow man in his room. Sarah, usually a bright and cheerful child, grew withdrawn and sullen. One evening, Mrs. Henderson found Sarah in the attic, speaking to someone who wasn't there. When asked, Sarah said she was talking to a lady named Eliza, who lived in the house long ago. Intrigued and alarmed, Mrs. Henderson did some research and uncovered the house's tragic past. Eliza Blackwood, the original owner, had lost her family in a fire that consumed the house nearly a century ago. Distraught, she took her own life in the attic. Desperate to protect her family, Mrs. Henderson called in a paranormal investigator, Dr. Mitchell. Equipped with sophisticated equipment, Dr. Mitchell and his team set up cameras and sensors throughout the house. The first night of their investigation yielded terrifying results. Orbs of light darted across the rooms, shadowy figures appeared on camera, and the air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. The climax came during a séance conducted by Dr. Mitchell. The team, along with the Hendersons, gathered in the dining room. As they attempted to communicate with Eliza, the temperature plummeted, and a cold wind swept through the room. The table shook violently, and the lights flickered before going out entirely. In the pitch darkness, they heard Eliza's voice, anguished and pleading for release. Suddenly, Sarah screamed and pointed to the corner of the room, where a translucent figure of a woman stood, weeping. The figure moved towards Sarah, reaching out as if to touch her. Dr. Mitchell quickly performed a cleansing ritual, and with a final, heart-wrenching scream, the figure disappeared. Despite the ritual, the spirit's presence lingered. The Hendersons continued to experience disturbances, albeit less frequent and intense. Eventually, they decided they couldn't live in Blackwood Manor any longer. They moved out, leaving behind a house that remains a somber reminder of past tragedies and restless spirits. Story 3, The Poltergeist of Whispering Pines, a frightening tale of real-life hauntings. In the secluded town of Whispering Pines, a series of poltergeist activities had plagued the particular house for years. When the Smith family moved in, they experienced unexplainable phenomena from day one. The quaint, two-story house at the edge of town seemed ideal for the Smiths, until the first night. It started innocently enough. Small objects would go missing or be found in strange places. Mrs. Smith's keys would appear in the refrigerator, and Mr. Smith's tools would end up in the bathtub. They laughed it off, attributing it to their young son, Billy, playing pranks. But soon, the manifestations grew sinister. One night, Mrs. Smith was in the kitchen when she felt a cold breath on her neck. She turned around, but no one was there. The kitchen knife she had been using suddenly flew off the counter, narrowly missing her. Frightened, she told Mr. Smith, who began to take the incidents more seriously. As days turned into weeks, the disturbances escalated. Doors would slam shut on their own, lights flickered incessantly, and eerie voices echoed through the halls. Billy, who was usually a happy and energetic child, became withdrawn and irritable. He complained of a scary man who watched him at night. Desperate for answers, the Smiths delved into the house's history, discovering a dark secret. The previous tenant, a reclusive old man named Harold, had died under mysterious circumstances. Neighbors whispered that he practiced dark rituals and summoned malevolent spirits. His death was never fully explained, and it was said that his spirit never left the house. One particularly terrifying night, the poltergeist's activity reached a peak. The Smiths were awakened by loud banging noises and the sound of shattering glass. They rushed to Billy's room, only to find his bed levitating off the ground. Billy was screaming, surrounded by a whirlwind of books and toys flying around him. Mr. Smith managed to pull him to safety, but the room remained in chaos. They sought help from a renowned medium, Madame Zora, who agreed to cleanse the house. Upon arrival, Madame Zora sensed a malevolent presence immediately. She set up an altar in the living room and began her ritual. As she chanted, the house shook violently, and a dark shadow appeared, hovering above them. Madame Zora confronted the entity, demanding it reveal its identity. The shadow took on a more defined shape, resembling Harold, but twisted and malevolent. With great effort, she managed to banish the spirit, but not before it let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the house. The Smiths were finally free from the haunting, but the experience left them scarred. They decided to move away from Whispering Pines, leaving the house vacant once again. The property remains unsold, with locals avoiding it, believing it to still be haunted by Harold's restless spirit. Story 4: The Poltergeist of Ravenwood Asylum, a real-life horror story. Ravenwood Asylum was notorious for its brutal history and rumored hauntings. Built in the late 1800s, it housed the mentally ill and was known for its inhumane treatment methods. When a group of urban explorers, Ethan, MIA, Jason, and Olivia, decided to investigate the abandoned facility, they expected to encounter a few eerie moments. Instead, they faced a night of unimaginable terror. From the moment they stepped inside, they felt a malevolent presence. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets of past horrors. Shadows moved in the periphery of their vision, and the faint sound of weeping echoed through the halls. As they ventured deeper, the disturbances became more aggressive, doors slamming shut, disembodied voices screaming, and objects flying through the air. The group decided to set up camp in the old infirmary, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal activity. Ethan, the group's leader, set up cameras and recording devices while the others explored the surrounding rooms. MIA found an old diary belonging to one of the nurses, detailing the gruesome treatments and the patient's suffering. Jason and Olivia discovered a hidden room with chains and shackles, confirming the asylum's dark history. As night fell, the activity intensified. The temperature dropped drastically, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty halls. The group huddled together, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a loud bang resonated from the upper floor, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged. They decided to investigate, despite their growing fear. On the second floor, they found a trail of blood leading to an old operating room. The door creaked open, revealing a scene straight out of a nightmare. Rusty surgical tools lay scattered around, and the walls were stained with dark, dried blood. In the center of the room, a gurney stood, its restraints still intact. As they approached, the room grew colder, and the lights flickered violently. Without warning, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. Panic set in as they tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature continued to drop, and their breath became visible in the freezing air. Suddenly, they heard a low, guttural growl coming from the shadows. Ethan shone his flashlight towards the sound, revealing a figure hunched in the corner. The figure slowly rose, its form twisted and grotesque. It had hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, emitting an unearthly scream. The group backed away, but the entity advanced, its movements jerky and unnatural. Desperate, they called out for help, but their voices seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. In a last-ditch effort, Ethan pulled out a vial of holy water he had brought, hoping it might fend off the spirit. He threw it at the entity, which let out a horrific shriek and dissipated into the shadows. The door burst open, and they fled, not stopping until they were safely outside the asylum's gates. Their experience left them traumatized, and they vowed never to return to Ravenwood Asylum. The footage they captured revealed chilling evidence of their encounter, solidifying the asylum's reputation as one of the most haunted places in the country. To this day, Ravenwood stands as a grim reminder of the horrors that took place within its walls, and the restless spirits that still linger. Story 5, The Poltergeist of Dark Hollow, a spine-chilling true story. Dark Hollow was a place shrouded in mystery and fear. The Johnson family, unaware of its dark reputation, moved into a quaint house nestled in the woods. They soon realized they were not alone. From the moment they moved in, strange occurrences began to plague their daily lives. It began with strange noises, footsteps in the attic, whispers in the dark. Mrs. Johnson often felt a presence watching her, and Mr. Johnson frequently heard his name being called when no one was around. The family dog refused to enter certain rooms, growling and barking at unseen entities. Cold spots were felt even in the summer heat, and lights would flicker without explanation. One night, as the family sat down for dinner, the chandelier above the dining table began to sway violently. The temperature dropped suddenly, and an oppressive feeling filled the room. The children, Emma and Jake, were visibly frightened, and Mr. Johnson decided to check the attic for any signs of intruders. He found nothing but old furniture and cobwebs, yet the feeling of being watched persisted. As the days passed, the manifestations grew more aggressive. Objects would be thrown across the room, and the sound of scratching at the walls became a nightly occurrence. Emma and Jake began to have vivid nightmares, waking up screaming about a dark figure standing at the foot of their beds. Mrs. Johnson discovered strange symbols drawn in dust on the floors, symbols that seemed to change daily. Desperate for answers, the Johnsons delved into the house's history. They learned that the previous owner, a man named Daniel, had been a recluse who practiced dark rituals. Neighbors spoke of strange lights and sounds coming from the house at night, and Daniel's sudden disappearance added to the mystery. It was said that he had summoned a malevolent spirit that now haunted the property. One particularly terrifying night, the poltergeist made its presence unmistakably clear. The family was awakened by a loud crash from the living room. They rushed downstairs to find the furniture overturned and a dark, shadowy figure standing in the center of the room. The figure emitted a low growl, and the air grew thick with an unholy presence. Mr. Johnson, trying to protect his family, grabbed a cross from the wall and held it out towards the entity. The figure recoiled, but the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The family huddled together, praying for protection. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and a cold wind swept through the house, extinguishing the oppressive presence. The Johnsons, now convinced their home was haunted, sought help from a renowned paranormal investigator, Dr. Carter. Armed with sophisticated equipment, Dr. Carter conducted a thorough investigation, capturing eerie voices and shadowy figures on camera. He performed a cleansing ritual, attempting to banish the spirit. During the ritual, the house shook violently, and the temperature dropped to freezing. The dark figure appeared again, more menacing than ever. Dr. Carter confronted the entity, demanding it reveal its purpose. The figure, now resembling Daniel, let out a bone-chilling scream and disappeared, leaving behind an air of malevolence. Despite the ritual, the haunting persisted, though less frequent and intense. The Johnsons decided they couldn't live in Dark Hollow any longer and moved away, leaving the house vacant. To this day, the property remains unsold, with locals avoiding it, believing it to still be haunted by Daniel's restless spirit. If these real-life poltergeist encounters sent chills down your spine, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more terrifying tales of the paranormal. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Share your own spooky experiences in the comments below, and stay tuned for more content that will keep you up at night. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are true.